anyway. It's too late for the rest.
Why?
Why? Oh, look, Paul. There's a certain time between a fella and a girl when it either comes off or not. If it doesn't then it never does.
Maybe we haven't got to our time yet.
I think we did. And you dropped the ball.
Don't be so sure.
I never thought I'd go through a thing like this for anybody.
Like what?
Like getting all mixed up in my head. Like wondering and worrying and thinking. Stuff like that. Last night I went to bed, I started thinking I couldn't fall asleep for 10 minutes. And I didn't know if it's good to find out so much so quick.
Nobody's born smart, Billy. You know what the stupidest thing on earth is? An infant.
What are you got against babies all of a sudden?
Nothing. I've got nothing against a brain that's 3 weeks old and empty. But after it hangs around for 30 years and hasn't absorbed anything, I begin to wonder about it.
What makes you think I'm 30?
I didn't mean you.
Oh, yes, you did.
I swear.
You certainly know how to get me sore.
I'm sorry.
30? Do I look 30 to you?
No.
But what'd you say it for?
I don't know. How old are you?
29.
Don't stop. I meant don't stop studying.
Hello and welcome to Book vs. Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of colonialbook.com and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
We are so excited about today's episode. It's going to be so much fun. If you saw the title and you love this movie like we do, you may be thinking, oh, I didn't know this was based on a book. Technically, it's not. It's based on a Broadway play that also starred Judy Holliday. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So, see, here's the deal. We talk about movies because we try to crank out a brand new episode for you every single week. So that means we had to expand what we mean when we say book. In theater, the play, the script is called the book. So we're technically, sticking pretty close to it. But really, we will consider any movie that is adapted from any kind of literary source, whether it's a magazine article, fiction, nonfiction, short story, novella, song, poem, we will consider it. So that means we're also always looking for suggestions. If you have some ideas for books and movies or, movie adaptations that you think we should cover, there's a few places where you can make those suggestions. It just has to be a film that is streaming on a major platform so everybody can access it. And also the source material has to be easily accessible. And those are really our only rules. So with that in mind, if you have suggestions to make, you want to meet other listeners of this podcast or interact with us, there's a few places where you can do that on the internet.
Be sure to like our Facebook page. It's Book vs. Movie Podcast. All the episodes are posted there first. We're much more interactive, though, in our Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group. You do have to ask to join, but we really do just talk about books and movies there, and people have all kinds of really great ideas and suggestions. Other places you can go are Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. All those places you type out book versus and movie. And then we have an old-timey email, Book versus Movie Podcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com. And if you would like some stickers, send us your address and we will drop them in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and would like to help keep us in books and movies, you can also support us on Patreon.
Patreon. We have been doing the show for 10 years now, so we're putting everything from 2021 and then previous to that on our Patreon wall. It's a way you can support our show. We have a couple of very affordable options. You can actually sign up for free because we do put video clips there, trailers, and things like that. But I want to thank Diane for joining recently. Thank you so much, Diane. And on our Patreon page now, Heartburn, Almost Famous, Dog Day Afternoon, Legally Blonde, and The Fantastic Mr. Fox. All those are on our Patreon wall right now. I forgot we covered all of them.
So I know. It's 10 years,
Yeah.
It's hard to remember all those movies and books. What was the name of our new follower on Patreon?
Diane.
Diane. Thanks, Diane. We really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah.
And just any way that you can share the show, we love.
Yes.
And we really appreciate. So, okay, listen. If you've seen this movie. It's just like, if you know, you know. If you've seen this movie, you probably love this movie unless you're some kind of a monster. If you've never seen this movie, oh boy, are you in for a treat. This is such a good movie. And so many brilliant people involved in this production. Starting with our writer, and we've never talked about Garson Kanin before, but we have talked about his wife a couple of times on this podcast because he was married to Ruth Gordon, who some of you may know as Maude from Harold and Maude. But she was also, as we discussed at the time, a brilliant writer, just an amazing creative person in her own right. And she and her husband, Garson Kanin, wrote many, many famous scripts, including a lot of like the Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn pieces that we know, the best ones. They are the ones responsible for that. So, but let's talk about our wonderful Mr. Garson Kanin.
Garson Kanin was born November 24th, 1912 in Rochester, New York. He dropped out of high school because it was the Depression and he had to go and make a living. He did though eventually go into the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He was starting to be an actor. He then became a writer. And as Margot said, Adam's Rib is something that he wrote with his wife, Ruth Gordon. He's also a director. He directed Funny Girl on Broadway. He had
his first play go to Broadway when he was 24 years old. So this guy is no slouch. He is a major talent.
And with this particular play, Born Yesterday, it comes out in 1946. It runs for 3 years, which is really kind of unheard of, especially, I mean, a musical I get.
In those days, there was no like Cats. There was no Phantom or Les Mis. Like that is something that happened way later in Broadway history. Yeah, back then shows opened and they had their run and they closed. And even if they were legendary shows that, you know, maybe went on to become hit Hollywood movies, they didn't always, you know, they didn't have these crazy long runs. But this was a very, very long run for this show.
And it came out, so it's after World War II. We're in New York City. He's married to Ruth Gordon. As we said, he and his wife wrote many screenplays and scripts together. They were both playwrights. She became more of the actor, but he occasionally did some acting, but he was mostly into directing and writing. So this play does super well. It premieres February 4th, 1946. It had a life before that when they were running it. I forget the actress's name that was originally attached to it.
Oh, it was, hold on. It was Jean Arthur. Who we talked about when we talked about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So she's the woman, the secretary in Mr. Smith Goes, I think, right? That's who she plays. She's also in You Can't Take It With You, Mr. Deeds Goes to... She was a very, very revered comedic actress. Yes, you're right. So originally the part was written for Jean Arthur, but then she quit the show when it was doing the, when they take it to like Boston and these kind of places to sort of workshop it before they take it to New York. And she was replaced with the not talked about nearly enough, incomparable Judy Holliday.
Right. So Judith Tuvim was born in Queens, New York in 1921. And she has an interesting path. She was raised in a Russian Jewish family. Her father left when she was young. She was mainly raised by her mother. She has a genius IQ. She was reading Proust when she was a child. And when she graduated high school, she immediately works for the theater company with Orson Welles and John Houseman.
Theater.
Thank you.
Yes. But she also was, she was a very talented singer. She doesn't sound like she's putting on a voice for this performance. A lot of performances, she's a very interesting things that she could do with her voice. But she was also a very good singer. And she kind of first came to Hollywood as a singer, as a part of a group called the Reviewers.
Right. And they spelled it funny.
They spelled it funny, like Revuers, something like that, like a review. And like the new zoo review when we were kids. And
Doug and Emmy Joe.
They yeah. They were frequently they frequently had this kind of a slouchy, pianist who would accompany them. He didn't really make much of himself, but he was called Leonard Bernstein.
That's right.
And so that's kind of how she came to Hollywood. The new reviewers, they used to do like comedy numbers. They did a lot of comedy numbers, and they were hired for a film starring Carmen Miranda, but then they were cut. I tried to find somewhere that number that was cut from the picture. I've not yet been able to find it. But anyway, I mean,
yeah,
absolutely brilliant. And then here's the thing, though. Her dad, who she lost kind of early in her life, was involved in. He was a founder member of the Jewish National Fund. He was also a member of the Socialist Party, which a lot of people were then.
Yeah, we've talked about it.
This comes back to really take a chunk out of her career. But she handles it because she does have a genius IQ.
Right.
She handles it pretty brilliantly.
Yeah, so she was a switchboard operator, and she was also doing this comedy and this singing at nights and on the weekends. She was at the Village Vanguard when she met them. And at the Village Vanguard in the Village, it was a club. They didn't even serve alcohol. They didn't have an alcohol, but they had all kinds of performances, but they also had all kinds of people speaking. After the stock market crash and during Prohibition and then with the Depression, a lot of people were like, "What are we doing in America? How are we helping people? What is our job moving forward?" And before fascism was taking over in Europe, and America was like, "No, we don't want to get involved." Like a lot of people were like that, or some people were isolationists, some people were interventionists. Anyway, so Judy Holliday, she's a singer. She's also very, very funny, and she immediately has a talent for acting and for comedy. And she's in a Broadway show. She does really well, but she's not the main character. She's with the Reviewers, and she's starting to gain her popularity. But one of the things was she always had, we would call, a weight problem. She was Rubenesque, or she was curvy. I mean, however you want to describe it. But unfortunately, Hollywood's always been really crappy about size of women and how, your thinness is goodness and all that crap. Anyway, so she would starve herself to be in these movie productions and then would eat and be normal the rest of the time. And this caused some pain for her. Anyway, she's asked to join this production. It's in Philadelphia to try out. Jean Arthur quits. She has 4 days to learn the lines and be the lead in this play. And she was terrified. But Garson Kanin really believed in her and said, "Will you try?" And she said, "Okay." And she's a hit. And it comes to New York, and it's a smash hit. And so and
again, it runs and runs and runs. This is how, and she is carrying this show.
Every scene.
This is how she's in almost every scene. And if she's not in the scene, they're talking about her.
Right.
And I mean, that is how brilliant this woman is. And yet, in terms of the greater American public, virtually unknown.
Yeah, it's 1,600 performances that she starred in. So, which is unbelievable money. And we've talked about many plays that then went on to Hollywood. Hollywood's always looking for material. And I didn't realize this. I saw an interview with Garson Kanin from 1978 or 79. Hollywood used to put out hundreds of movies every year. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So there was a lot of crap that was released amongst all, every once in a while, there was a good one. So you never knew. We talked about Casablanca. Nobody knew that was going to be a good movie. They were just doing their thing. So Hollywood, after we had Gone with the Wind where they had the big, looking for their Scarlett O'Hara. So they were looking for the name of the character is Billy Dawn. That's who she plays.
We want a Judy Holliday type.
Which happens
not
all
actually
the
her.
time. It still happens. Somebody has the part on Broadway and then they want to bring it to movies. And they're like, well, and Hollywood people all the time have to tell me, Margot, nobody knows who they are. Because I live in New York. Margot lives in San Diego. But anyway, so she's not even in the running. They have all these other women, but after a while, so then Garson, Kanin, and his wife Ruth Gordon wrote Adam's Rib, and they wrote it specifically for Spencer and we have to cover that one day because that's absolutely one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah,
that's my favorite. Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn.
It's my favorite of them too. Absolutely, yeah, and really because of Judy Holliday.
She plays a supporting role, but she steals the picture from everybody.
Oh my gosh, she's so amazing. The first scene where Katharine, if you know Adam's Rib, it's a male lawyer and a female lawyer, and they end up on opposite sides of this very, very sensational. It's not murder case, but it's an attempted murder case, and nobody actually gets killed, but Judy Holliday plays the defendant. And who has shot the lover of her husband, who's played by Tom Yule, who we talked about when we talked about The 7-Year Itch. Mm-hmm. And this first scene where Katharine Hepburn is representing Judy Holliday. It's like stop the world. Wait, what? Who is this woman? Everybody, Judy Holliday's talking. So good.
And Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, they were all friends. And Katharine Hepburn was so generous with her. She insisted that whenever reporters were visiting the set that they interview her, that they speak to her. There are times when Katharine Hepburn's back is to the camera, just focused on Judy Holliday.
Literally, she turns her back on the camera so that we will be focused on. I mean, they were really, they're in a hurry. TikTok. Yeah. Because, Born Yesterday is moving forward as a production, and we need to make sure that people know who this Judy Holliday is. And, I mean, it is it's funny, it's heartbreaking, it's everything. She is a woman who has bought a handgun and gone and shot at another person, and yet you're rooting for her. She's totally guilty. But you are completely rooting for her. Amazing.
And we should say Garson Kanin, he didn't even want to sell it to Hollywood because he had such a low opinion. He had worked on Hollywood movies and he just seen, like I said, he said there were like 750 movies released, 756 released the year before this. So, like I said, a lot of crap out there. And then, is it Harry Kahn who was in charge of the motion picture company? Right. He basically
notorious,
awful man.
Yes, notorious monster of Hollywood. In fact, the monster character in Born Yesterday is based on
Harry Cohn,
and he didn't even know. He didn't even recognize himself in this guy. But notorious for propositioning his actresses. You will get this part, but only if you have sex with me.
And he did that to Judy Holliday, who ran out of the room and worried about losing her career. And this happened to women. It still happens to women all the time. What are we saying? He actually offered Garson Kanin $1 million for the rights to this. This is 1950. This movie's coming out. That's the equivalent of $13 million today. Like, it's unbelievable. But they knew it was going to be a sure thing because it was so popular in New York. So huzzah. I should say, by the way, he and Ruth were together. Ruth Gordon were together until her death. And I think it was 85 that she passed away.
They were married for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then he married an actress after that. And then he passed away in 99. So this play is on for 3 years. And we have Judy Holliday finally being allowed to star in this film. She had to basically starve herself. But we should just to give a broad idea of what this is about. It's about, It takes place in Washington, D.C. And Harry Brock is this animal of a guy, just crude.
He is a brute.
Yes.
And the thing is, like, because it is a comedy, it's a very real stab at corruption in the United States. I mean, it's totally relevant today. And when we meet him, kind of like a Tony Soprano, when you meet him, you're kind of laughing at him. He talks, he don't talk so good. He's throwing his weight around. He's throwing his money around. He's ridiculous. He wears loud outfits and everything. But then as the play progresses and as the movie progresses, you see how really dark he is. Yeah. And we learn he has had people killed. He's violent. He has no qualms about pounding somebody to death. So you as an audience watching it, like at first, like I say, you're like, oh, haha, isn't he silly, da 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 da. And then as you go on, you're like, whoa, I wasn't taking this seriously. Like I got lured in by his mobster charm, and as you do, and I missed the real danger that's there. And so it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. Now I think the play all takes place within that hotel suite.
Yes, that's
right?
We should say
It's
yes.
a big difference.
It's very different. So it just takes place, like Margot said, in this hotel suite. He has a girlfriend. Her name is Billy Dawn. She used to be a singer on Broadway. They are engaged. They have not been married, and in the play, they openly just live together. There's no, nobody's questioning that. But they live together. They're in D.C. for a few weeks for business, and he wants to basically corrupt a congressman. He wants to bribe a congressman for whatever thing he needs. But he
wants to bribe a congressman for a number of reasons. He wants to have this congressman in his pocket. Mm-hmm. But specifically, he wants, in an eerily familiar turn of events, he specifically wants this congressman to make it possible for him to form a cartel.
Right. And this is at a time when people were appalled at this idea, by the way. Originally, it was going to be a senator, and they would said, oh, no senator would ever be this corrupt. So it was decided that it would be a congressman, because in America, and if you don't know about America, there's 2 senators for every state, and then we have congressmen for different districts based on the population. But he's going to use money, and it's $80,000. It's a lot of money for the time to buy a congressman so he can get what he wants. He has a lawyer that works for him that is a heavy drinker and is, just sort of made a deal with the devil. Like he makes $100,000 a year in 1948, which is great money, but he's working with a criminal. And Harry Brock is rough and crude and misogynistic. And at first we're it's so over the top. You're kind of like, oh, he's just a buffoon. And she's so adorable that you're like, well, he can't be that bad. But then as you get to know him, you're like, yeah, he's pretty bad. And she's in a dicey situation. He hires a journalist named Paul Verrill to be the tutor for this woman, to teach her about the ways of DC, how to speak DC. And DC is its own life, we should say.
Very much like... And we should say, it's very much like in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Garson Kanin also was a great admirer of Frank Capra, and this is a very Capra-esque kind of a story. Paul Verrill, who's played by
William Holden.
Oh, I love him.
And I almost texted you, Margot.
Oh, I just love him.
The other day, I was watching this, and I almost said, I think I had my sexual awakening with William Holden, because I've never found him more attractive.
Him in anything.
Oh my God, is he sexy?
I love him in absolutely every single thing. I love him in that episode of I Love Lucy.
Oh, he's great in that.
Is he on screen? I'm watching.
Picnic.
Picnic.
We'll definitely do that one day.
On the stage on Broadway, he's played by Gary Merrill, who we discussed when we talked about All About Eve. He is the male lead in that, and didn't he and Betty got married after that, right? Briefly.
Oh yeah, he was married, and she was getting divorced. And they were filming in San Francisco should we also talk about All About Eve is filming at this time, and also Sunset Boulevard is filming.
It's an amazing time in Hollywood.
It's an amazing time for women in Hollywood, but it doesn't continue. I mean, unfortunately, in the 50s, roles for women, I mean, it doesn't come back for decades, really. Which is awful, because these are the most talented actors that we have going. So they have her. So hires Paul Verrill. And then Paul and Billy immediately have chemistry. And she basically says, are you up for some fun when we're hanging around DC? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And he's being paid $200 a week, which once again is a lot of money. So he's basically teaching, and DC is its own thing. DC is its own language, its own everything.
Our mobster, having arrived in DC and starting to meet movers and shakers in DC, quickly realizes, not about himself, because he's not very self-aware, but he realizes, like, oh, my girlfriend's kind of rough around the edges, and if I'm going to be able to make these wheels and deals that I need to make, she needs to be polished up a little bit, you know. Meanwhile, he is just as crude.
Oh,
much more so. Openly threatens people. Like, has no problem with
so
that.
Rude.
But he's worried about her. He's so rude.
He's so condescending and so just cheap and just really just gaudy. Just
very insecure.
Yes.
And has to throw his weight around all over the place. And she knows this about him.
And she has like several mink coats. They're spending $250 a night at this hotel.
There's so much lavish money.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
it's quite something.
So he's educating her. She's learning more. And as she's learning more and she's glowing under this attention, they're falling in love. And she also wants to leave Harry. And also Harry's having her sign, his lawyer's having her sign all these documents that she has no idea what she's doing. And I could judge people, but I do the same thing. But
yeah. They're hiding his money and his dealings by putting certain things, key things in her name.
Right.
And actually what they have done is she actually has a controlling interest in all of his ventures, so that if he ever gets if law enforcement ever attempts to catch up with him, he could be like, well, I'm not the one that's in charge. She is. That's why he keeps stringing her along. The lawyer, meanwhile, is trying to persuade him to marry Billy, because a wife can't testify against her husband. And the lawyer kind of sees where this is going. Like, you know, eventually this is all going to kind of catch up. And you want to make sure that she's not going to be, you know, she's seen a lot.
Right.
Maybe we don't want her sharing that on the stand. But he still doesn't, he thinks he knows better than everybody else.
Right.
He thinks he's smarter than everybody else. And so he ignores that very good piece of advice and until it's too late.
Right.
So she's learning more and more. She's learning about Washington. You know, what are the main things to talk about? What are the main things you want to see? What are the things you want to, when you're at the cocktail parties with these congressmen and their wives, as you're making small talk, what are the things that you want to be able to say that, like, oh, yes, I stopped in and saw a session of the Supreme Court. These are the things you want to be able to kind of pop into your conversation. And as she's learning what she needs to learn in order to be able to do that, she's realizing, oh, like, I knew he was rough and I knew he was kind of crude and rude and all of that. I didn't quite get how much of a real dyed-in-the-wool crook this guy is, and how many people he is actually bilking, and how serious a crime he's here to commit.
Yeah. And so she confronts him and she's going to leave him, and he's awful. But she does get away from him. Like, she and Paul, like, just spoilers, by the way, we spoil everything. In the end, love wins out. Everything is sorted out, but it's very, very funny. And Judy Holliday is such a delight. Just, she could take a B joke and make it an A+. I mean, she just everything about her is just effervescent and sparkly. And you can't help but like her, and you can't help but root for them. And they're talking about fascism, and they're talking about corruption, and they're talking about roles of men and women, and they're talking about just America, what we're made of, and who we are as people. Which is very, on the one hand, like, we're against fascism. We just went to war with fascists. We just came home, right? And at the same time, there's also this fear of communism. So where is there overlap in ideologies and things like that?
Where does one start to cross over into the other? And there are always, fascists don't come into power all by themselves. There's always people who are kind of into fascism and, very
They
happy
just
to
want a
see it.
daddy to tell them what to do. Everything old is new again. It's as the saying goes. The play runs for years. It's brought up every once in a while in New York. I think the last time it was with James Belushi and Robert Sean Leonard, and I'm blanking on the woman's name.
Okay. I love Judy Holliday. I love Judy Holliday. I will watch her, just like William Holden. I will watch her in absolutely anything. And from the time I was a little girl, Judy Holliday always reminded me of Madeline Kahn.
Oh, absolutely.
And Madeline Kahn did star in one of the revivals of Born Yesterday. And of course, she was absolutely brilliant. Of course she was.
Judy, by the way, very, very tragic. She died of breast cancer. She had had breast cancer. She had the surgeries, and then the cancer came back, and she died in 1965 at the age of 43. After this movie comes out, we should just say that she had been with some radicals, I guess you could say, when she was at the Village Vanguard, when she was with the Reviewers. She'd been to meetings. Her uncle was a communist. She's this Russian Jewish kid from Queens who grew up during the Depression. There were lots of people.
That was the culture of where she was living at the time.
Right. So we've talked about this in other episodes, but there was the HUAC Commission, which is the House of Un-American Activities, and they were trying to get out the communists out of the film industry. And there's movies where people said things like, hey, maybe we can all share this car and take this car to work and back. And then people
and they're like, communism.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And it's like, no, maybe it's just practical because they're all going to the same place and they can't everybody afford to have their own car. I mean, it's just, but there was a lot of fear, and a lot of people lost their livelihoods for decades after this. So she was on that chopping block for her career at that time, and she was so smart and so charming and wise enough and a good enough actress that she could act dingy when it suited her, and she was just like, I'm a ditzy actress. I'm just doing the parts that people give me. And also, that's just what actors do. They're given their words, and that's what they do for a living.
But she definitely played it up. She definitely way leaned into the dinginess of it.
Her IQ was over 170, so she was considered a genius. I mean, she was a very intelligent woman, but there were a lot of people who were, Kanin himself was also in that. I mean, lots of people.
Yes, and a lot of people were threatened and intimidated and coerced into pointing fingers at colleagues and friends and so on. And so she, again, brilliant woman. She gets through this very hideous ordeal,
right.
And doesn't name names. They just think, oh, she's just ditzy little,
just
fine,
a blonde
whatever.
actress, just a woman, a blonde actress. She's just right. So they go to the Oscars, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of. There's a woman who was nominated, but we have Betty Davis and Ann Baxter for All About Eve, which we've covered before. That's on our Patreon wall, by the way. We have Gloria Swanson for Sunset Boulevard, which we will cover one day if they ever make a movie out of that musical, which I'd love to see. And
the other one was Eleanor Parker for a movie called Caged,
which I'd never seen. But it's a hell of a year for actresses in movies. I mean, these are all amazing parts. I didn't see that one, but everything else is like they're amazing. They all wanted to win, but only one person can win. And Judy Holliday was in New York with Gloria Swanson, by the way. And what a lot of people used to just, if you had to work, the Oscars are on a Sunday or a Monday night.
Yeah.
You know,
Them's the breaks. You're not going to the Oscars.
Right. So you would watch it from a place in New York, Sardi's or whatever. And so that's how she found out that she won. It was the only Oscar she ever won. But brilliant actor, brilliant career, so smart, tragically taken away from us way too soon and not appreciated enough. I agree with you, because she's just spectacular.
Just so influential. She just influenced so many people who came after her, and her approach to, I want to say character acting, although, again, she's the lead. And same thing like in It Should Happen to You, which is an amazing movie. Just so important on stage and in film. She was, I can't remember if she was married. She was involved with two really humongous jazz artists of the 20th century, David Oppenheim and Jerry Mulligan. Again, she grew up in the Village,
right?
That whole scene, this was all going on at the same time. She has a son named Jonathan Oppenheim, who is a very well-known editor and edited, among other things, the documentary Paris is Burning.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, just a very connected person.
Right.
Judy Holliday.
Well, should we play the trailer?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the original trailer for 1950's Born Yesterday.
Judy Holliday in Born Yesterday proves that a chorus girl can wind up almost anywhere, especially if she has a good line, knows her business.
I wasn't only in the chorus. I spoke lines. 5 of them. Ask anybody. I could have been a star, probably, if I'd have stuck to it. But Harry didn't want me being in the show. He didn't want to share me with the general public.
You'll roar at the hilarious adventures of a beautiful blonde who was dumb like a fox and the big bad wolf that she tamed like a lamb.
Born Yesterday, Broadway's greatest hit in years, co-stars Academy Award winner Broderick Crawford, Judy Holliday in her original role, and William Holden.
You'll thank your lucky stars you were born in time to laugh at Born Yesterday.
Our director is George Cukor. We've talked about him many, many times before. What a great crew we have here. Broderick Crawford is Harry Brock, he's
absolutely wonderful.
Funny,
he
scary.
Nails it. Funny and scary.
How is this possible?
You don't have to get so pally with everybody.
Paul says it's all
Never
right.
mind, Paul says. I don't like it.
You know what you are?
What?
Antisocial!
You can say that again. Hello. Where do you guys think you've been? You know what time it is?
Sorry.
You're always sorry.
My fault. How do you do?
How you do?
How are you, Billy?
Superb. A new word.
William Holden as Paul Verrill. Yum. Howard St. John is Jim Devery. That's his lawyer.
He's fantastic. He's
funny
perfect.
as hell.
Mm-hmm.
I've been dead for 8 years. Have I managed to do? Frank Otto as Eddie, who's the servant, and everybody is just so funny. It comes out in Christmas of 1946. They had location filming in D.C. So in the movie, we actually watch her take her around D.C.
It's wonderful.
It's just so great.
It's just fantastic. So in the movie version, the stage version all takes place in this hotel suite, but in the movie version, just like with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, in the movie version, we get to see William Holden showing Judy Holliday all around Washington, D.C. They go to see the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, and they go to the Jefferson Memorial, and they go to the, what do they call that? The body of water that's right before the Washington Memorial, the mall.
Yes,
and,
the mall in Washington.
The
Watergate.
And you see her being, first of all, the wardrobe. You could just watch this thing with the sound off and check out her wardrobe in this film. It is amazing.
She used to get her hair dyed, I think it was every 3 days.
It's so blonde.
It's so blonde. The way he just says, "Hey, what do you?" And she goes, "What?" When he says,
Hey, Billy!
What?
Not bad, huh?
It's all right.
It's wonderful. It's just...
her voice is a character in and of itself. She just speaks. It's so funny. She has these beautiful doe eyes that just
She's just
sparkle.
so expressive. And you see her, she does a lot. I mean, again, the woman can use her voice like no other. The things that she can do with her voice, astonishing. But she does so much acting in this film without saying a word. So much of it is her face as she is connecting dots and realizing what kind of a danger she's actually in and what kind of danger the country is in, and how she is in a unique position to stop this very terrible thing from happening. And she, you see her wheels turning as she figures it out. And yet she's playing Broderick Crawford, like a fiddle.
Yes.
Even when he's violent with her, she never lets up. She's like, she kind of lets it happen because she knows that it's going to get her closer to where, so she's also brave. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I just love this. I love the whole sequence of them going around Washington, D.C. because you see her being dazzled by the architecture, the history,
Right.
all of it. The school children that are also with her on these tours, the whole, her experiencing all of that is so delightful.
That was me as a kid. We used to go every year.
Yes.
It was the
You
best.
can't not be dazzled. I mean, like when we were there for the Women's March.
Yes.
We were like, look at that. What's that? The whole time. Yeah.
America's a
It
young
is
country.
impressive.
So if like for us, this is impressive that it's like 250 years ago that we had all that. I mean, that's what we have. But yeah, to watch her do that, the chemistry she has with William Holden is just second to none. She's wearing this
Electric. It's just electric.
She's in this white jumpsuit
Oh,
that sparkles.
we cannot, there's no way for us to possibly convey the splendor of wardrobe in this film. And Broderick Crawford's wardrobe too, because he's very loud. That's
Yes.
very tacky, very expensive. That's obviously like a silk dressing robe, but like who is wearing?
Well, also in his size, like to get it all tailored for his size.
So clearly it's custom.
Yes.
Clearly this guy picked out this crazy wavy fat, like, who are you, sir? What is going on here? But her she's, it's a black and white film. But she's often in white, which is just, so she's just glowing. Spectacular.
It's
Spectacular.
Hello.
Hello.
I tried your suite. No answer.
Yeah, I know. I'm not in.
Morning papers.
Oh, you could have saved yourself the trouble. I don't read papers.
Never?
Yeah, once in a while, the back part, the funnies.
Oh, I think you should. The front part, the not so funnies.
Why?
Well, because it's interesting.
Not to me.
Well, how do you know if you never read it?
Look, if you're going to turn out to be a pest, we could call the whole thing off right now.
Sorry?
Oh, well, I look at the papers sometimes, but I just never understand it, so what's the sense?
I tell you what you do. You look through these, and anything you don't understand, why, just make a circle around it. And then tomorrow I'll explain. Whatever I can. All right?
All right.
And I thought you might like these.
Well, I'll try.
Look, just start reading. If you don't like it, stop. Start something else.
Oh, there's only one thing my eyesight isn't so hot.
Well, why don't you wear glasses?
Glasses?
Sure, why not?
Because it's terrible. Of course, they're not so bad on men.
There was a remake done in 93.
I totally forgot about this.
Yeah. I saw some of it. I was
I
looking
saw
at
some of it too.
Yeah. I mean,
It's-
I do like Melanie Griffith very much.
I like all of those people.
Yeah,
very
it's
much.
John Goodman and Don Johnson and Melanie Griffith.
Mm-hmm.
Dakota must have been a baby at this time.
I would imagine it's like in the mid 90s.
93.
Uh,
Yeah. And it's okay. It's fine. But it's
yeah, I
not.
don't know. It doesn't sizzle anywhere near the level of this version.
From Hollywood Pictures,
Last night I started thinking and I couldn't fall asleep for 10 minutes.
they said Billy Dawn would never be more than a Vegas showgirl.
She's on the stupid side.
What do you know? You open beer cans with your teeth.
Now they're learning
I'm not taking it anymore.
to never underestimate the power
You're Harry's boss.
of an underestimated woman.
Am I in the room?
Melanie Griffith, John Goodman, Don Johnson. Born Yesterday, directed by Luis Mandoki, rated PG.
There's something
Yeah.
also just about time and place and when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
I super love this. It's fantastic. I like no notes, honestly. Like I really like
It's brilliant. It is from start to finish.
it's so good.
The hotel suite, the maids, every single the congressman and his wife.
Yes.
The where her singing along to the radio, where her singing when they're playing the cards, and then you find out she's a singer, and you're like, "Wow, really?" But you know, it's just so good because she could really sing.
Yeah, no.
She could really super sing.
You're in a big league now, and I want you should watch your step.
All right.
You gotta learn to fit in. Can't have you around if you don't, and that's no bull. Have to be careful of what you do and what you say.
3.
28.
28.
28.
You could use a little education yourself if you ask me.
Who asked you?
Nobody.
So shut up.
Can I talk?
Go on, play your cards.
It's a free country.
That's what you think.
Boom, 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 boom.
Do you mind?
Gin.
But in this, it's this like reedy, thin little like, oh, it's so awful and wonderful. Just brilliant. And the pacing of it, that's the other thing about the 90s one. The pacing is really weird. This one is just like snappity, snappity, snap. It is just moving on. And the dialogue. It's absolutely genius level dialogue. So smart, so funny. Gives you, it's not hit. There's a lot of exposition, but it never hits you over the head with the exposition. It comes about very naturally in the dialogue, which I love because, like the whole thing about why is he there and what has he done and what kind of guy is this and what are the mechanisms by which they're influencing this congressman. It could be very expositional, but it never ever really seems like that.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Just love it. Perfect.
Well, I've never seen the play.
I've never seen the play either.
So I'm going to give it to the movie because that's all I can.
Although I can only imagine.
I bet it was so much fun.
It must have been just unforgettable. It must have just flown by and,
What a night at the theater that must have been. Gary Merrill. I mean, it's just.
He's no slouch.
He's no slouch either. I bet that was fun. I bet that was super fun. So I'm going to say movie.
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah.
Agree. And just.
Mr. Kanin.
Oh, just the whole team.
Yeah.
The whole team except for Mr. Cohn.
Except for Mr. Cohn, who sucks.
He could take a flying one as far as I'm concerned. Now. I also agree, movie.
Okay.
We have a very fun episode coming up next. I'm very excited. We've been talking about this forever.
We've been talking about this actually forever, but we thought it would be a good summer one to do. So we're going to have a special guest join us next week, a returning champion, Kristen Meinzer. We're going to be talking about The Bling Ring. So that was a movie, and it's available all over the place for streaming. You can definitely get your hands on it. It's based on a Vanity Fair article from Nancy Jo Shale that we'll post in our Facebook group. It's very easy to get your hands on, but it's of a time and a place. Like I'm super excited to talk about it. And apparently Paris Hilton had them film it at her house of all things. And Sofia Coppola directed it. I mean, this is going to be,
it'll be fun.
It's going to be great. So, but please send us your suggestions for book versus movie, all those places I mentioned at the top of this show. Our email, once again, is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all my social media callouts are at She's Not Your Mama. And where can they find you?
I'm at brooklynfitchick.com, and I'm at brooklynfitchick for Threads and Instagram, and I'm at Brooklyn Margot for TikTok and also for Twitter. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for dropping by. We'll be back soon with a new episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We're a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You could find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. You could find us on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Book versus a Movie. Just spelled it all out. We have a Patreon page. Type in there Book vs. Movie Podcast, where you can find 8 years worth of shows. You can follow Margot D on social media at Brooklyn Margot and also Brooklyn Fit Chick. You can find Margot P at She's Nacho Mama. Thank you again for listening, and please be sure to send along your suggestions for the show. Remember, the book needs to be easy to get your hands on, and the movie has to be streaming on a major platform. We will be back soon with a new episode.